Parenting is that too.
Yes.
You have these little people and they're looking at you and they're trusting you. And it's like, oh my goodness, why do they repeat and why do they mimic all of my worst habits, right? They pick up the worst things, all the things you want them to do that you're trying to drill into them. They miss those things. And the other little things that you do that you haven't gotten rid of yet, they pick those up.
Welcome to the show called Let's Talk Homeschool, brought to you by Apologia Educational Ministries. This is the show where we talk about everything homeschooling: the who, what, when, where, why, and how. We want to affirm and encourage you in the decision to homeschool, challenge and inspire you to take it to new heights, and celebrate everything you get to experience along the way in this adventure of a lifetime. We are your hosts, Davis and Rachel Carmen. Today's show is titled Homeschooling Out of Conviction.
It's a good way to homeschool.
Okay, Rachel, let's talk homeschool.
Okay.
So last year in 2023, there was an article in the Washington Post. We actually did a podcast on that subject where it was talking about the growth of homeschooling and why people homeschool, things like that. So go back and listen to that episode. But then soon after, Al Mohler on his briefing podcast made the following comment. And it's kind of the impetus for today's show.
Sure.
He said that you've got to think of your family as a school. And part of the point there was that you are training your kids. You're supposed to train your kids in the admonition and instruction of the Lord.
Right.
And so to instill those things, you can't just go haphazardly.
Right.
And if you've listened to us long enough, you know that we think about being intentional parents, intentional in your marriage, intentional in your homeschooling, intentional in your goal setting in life in general.
Right.
And so once you have this mentality that my family is like a quote unquote school,
Right.
where education is supposed to happening, where training and discipleship is supposed to happening, it can have a major paradigm shift in your thinking.
Yeah.
So that's the first part that we want to talk about. So when you think of family, our family as a school, what comes to mind?
Well, I mean, I think I try to step back because we homeschooled for 26 years. And so I'm trying to step back to when we first started, when, I called the only person on the planet that I knew homeschooled. And she said to me a phrase that at the time I could not even come close to digesting. She said, you've got to stop thinking about this as an educational choice. And you need to start thinking about this as a lifestyle.
Exactly right. I remember that.
And I just remember going, whatever, what am I doing on Monday? I mean, I was so panicked. And so I'm guessing that maybe some people who are listening today are just like, Davis, I'm just trying to figure out what we're doing tomorrow. I'm just trying to survive this year. I'm just trying to figure out how to do an 8th grader and a toddler. I'm just trying to, but you're right. It does matter. It is a paradigm shift if we dare to think about this differently and not try to compartmentalize, this is our family time and this is our school time. And I'll even go ahead and say, and this is our church time. But this is our family, and all of those things are contextualized. It's organic. It's all interconnected.
Well, exactly. And I don't want people to think that we're talking about bringing public school home.
No.
We are very strong advocates of saying, do not bring your public school or even private school experience home into your homeschool.
Right.
You've got to think completely different, think lifestyle. And the way you were just saying it, we used to talk about everything being interconnected.
Right.
Our marriage, our parenting, our homeschool, our church, our
service,
everything
Yeah.
was all interrelated and connected. And for a woman, that's probably a little bit easier. You think of the plate of spaghetti all mixed together, everything touches. A woman can probably relate to that a little bit easier than men, who we have our boxes. We compartmentalize, and I am now doing school, I am now doing church, I am now doing family.
Yeah.
But I want to challenge you guys to let those boxes sit on top of each other and be inside and outside of each other and touch and interconnect.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I think about it that way, and I step back, like I said, to 26 years ago, and she says that to me, it's actually kind of scary what she was saying to me, because I knew intuitively, as little as I knew about what we were doing on Monday or what this looked like, and as little as I wanted to do this, which was not at all, it was scary to think that I knew that I was going to have to make a lot of changes. I mean, that's just that's the bottom line. I knew that if we were going to step into this was going to mean that I was going to have to own some stuff, that I was going to have to make some changes, that I was going to have to be more disciplined, that I was going to have to live what I believed. I knew that. And I think that was part of the repellent of getting into this. But I think that's the invitation, is to really embrace what God's already done. You know, we talk so much about God goes before, walks with, and comes behind us. God's already gone before you and given you this family context in which to raise and disciple these children. He knows what he's doing. He knows your marriage. He knows it in and out. He knows the context of your home, your community, your neighborhood, your church. He knows the pros, the cons, the good, the bad, the ugly. He knows. And he's daring you to believe and trust him that it can all come together for the education of your children.
All right. And, you know, Al Mohler was the one that said this quote, that you need to think of your family as a school.
Yeah.
If I were to say that quote or coin it myself, I'd probably say it a little bit differently, because I probably wouldn't use the word school. However, I'm going to make the following point. We named our homeschool in what I consider the most creative name possible. It was called the Carmen Family Home School.
Right. It was not really creative. I mean, it
wasn't really creative, but wow, was it descriptive?
Yeah, it was what it is.
Because it had the Carmen name on it.
Mm-hmm.
It was family centric.
Right.
It happened primarily at home, and it was school meaning
Education.
Academy. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Education, training. Maybe you'd come up with a synonym for the word school. Because I would say, in some ways, if you could reverse this, you need to think of your homeschool as a family. Making the family the central piece of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And that's when it can become a lifestyle.
It can.
When you think of your homeschool is just part of your family life.
Exactly.
And it's all happening here in this context. Maybe you drive to different co-ops and support groups and extracurricular activities, but you as the parents are driving everything that's happening in the education and training and discipleship of your children, which God has given you with that responsibility.
Right. And I remember early on, so in the state of North Carolina, you're supposed to school for 180 days. And I remember being really intimidated with that at first. And there are actually papers that you can copy and print off and mark off, put the date and mark, we did school this day. And then it was like, no. Because if you step into this idea using Mohler's words and then, sort of incorporating what my friend said too, that family is your school, or that homeschooling is a lifestyle and not just an academic choice, it's 24/7, 365. I don't need to write down the dates of 180 days because it's all the time. When you embrace this, it literally is a game changer, because going to the grocery store is school. Balancing your checkbook, paying the bills, doing the yard, taking dinner to a family that just had a baby. All of these things that most people would not line up as academic are your school, because they're happening within your family, and there are things that need to be done.
And they're training their kids.
They're training. You're showing your children. And there's so many of these things that most people would say lie outside of the framework of academics and or school work that I think are really the bedrock of any education. Your kids need to know how to go to the grocery store. They need to know how to plan a menu. They need to know how to respond when somebody calls. They need to know how to mow the grass or fill up the car. All of these fundamental skills are getting buried under things that we think are more important.
Right.
And we call those educational worksheets. But they're not. We got to do these other things. And because those are the other things are where the character training actually happens too.
Well, right. And what's coming to my mind, this is impromptu, is literally invite your kids into the life you're living as much as possible.
Right.
So, for example, when I was a deacon at one of the churches we were attending, when I was visiting some people in the hospital, I took my kids with me. But my most favorite thing like this that I did with my sons was I went to an early morning Bible study.
Yep.
And I brought my 8 and 10-year-old to a 6 o'clock Bible study, to a 5:30 a.m. Bible study, to a 5 a.m. Bible study, because that's what I did. And I was inviting them into my life, and I wanted them to fall in love with God's word. And they still remember those very fondly, partly because they were doing something with Dad.
Right.
It could be fishing, it could be a Bible study, whatever you're doing. When you invite your kids into all of your life, then your family does become your academy, your school, your educational location.
Right, because we've abdicated the education of our children to the experts, right? At the end of the day, we're the experts on our kids. We know them better than anybody else. We love them more than anybody else. God has sent them into our home under whatever circumstances, fostering, adoption, biological, however that's happened. God has built our families, and he's asking us to trust him. And there's so many things that we learn in the context of family that you can't learn anywhere else. And there's encouragement there. I mean, it's got everything that you need right there at home.
All right, we're going to take a quick break and then return to this conversation. First, I want to let you know and remind you that our listening audience, you can now watch us on YouTube, or you can continue to listen on your favorite podcast app. This show is brought to you by Apologia Educational Ministries. Their mission is to help homeschooling families learn, live, and defend the Christian faith. They're the #1 publisher of creation-based science, math, Bible, and worldview curriculum with hundreds of #1 awards over 2 decades. Creation-based and award-winning. Now that's impressive, but more importantly, that's why Apologia is trusted by homeschooling families all across the USA and the world. You can go to apologia.com. It's a great place to explore creation. Okay, so we're back. We are talking about the conviction to homeschool. So we've been talking about this quote by Al Mohler on the briefing where he said, you got to think of family as a school, think of your family as a school.
Right.
But one of the afterthoughts you and I had when listening to his show and after our own podcast about this Washington Post article was that there is a conviction to homeschooling.
Yeah.
And when you think about the other educational options, specifically private school or public school, with public school, there really isn't a conviction. Does anybody really decide to send their kids to public school out of a conviction?
I think it's more of a convenience than it is. I know that's what it was for me. I mean, I was thrilled that we didn't live 5 miles from the school that our oldest was supposed to go to. I was thrilled that the school bus was going to be at the end of the road. I was thrilled that you were going to take him and somebody else was going to bring him home. It was all about convenience for me. There was nothing about it that was conviction. I was just happy that he was going to be on the bus.
Well, exactly. And if you have never listened to our story about how we got started, it's entitled Me Homeschool. And very short version is our son went to public school for 13 days, and then we brought him home on a Friday, not knowing what we were going to do on Monday, called the only 3 people on the planet that we knew who homeschooled, and
started our journey.
Yeah. And then, like we've said, it was 26 years in the making. We finished in May of 22 is when our 7th graduated from the Carmen family homeschool.
But that was how we started. And it was a startling start. It was a forced start. It was I am not thrilled. I am not happy. I am not excited about this start. But it resulted in conviction.
That's right.
Over time, it did become conviction because we did have choices as we went forward. But it became, this was the best thing for our son. This was the best thing for our family. And oh my goodness, look what God is doing.
All right. And so I've heard many families, I mean, there's a large number of people that still send their kids to public school. And the Christians that I know that do that, some will say it's because we want our kids to be salt and light.
Okay.
Now, I would say that's still not sending your kids to public school out of a conviction that it's the better option.
Right.
In some ways, it's actually saying, it's not the best option, and I'm going to send my kids in as missionaries to try and make some change. Of course, the classic response to that is, would any reputable mission society send 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10-year-olds into the mission field?
No.
I don't think so.
Well, not for 40 hours a week.
Right.
I mean, I think we've taken our kids on mission trips, and I think you go in and you have an interaction with those that are lost, and then you come out and you debrief. And I just don't know that parents characteristically can compete with 40 hours of exposure in the public school system and debrief. I don't think you have that much time in the day.
Well, right.
And I also happen to believe, I used to teach in the public school system, and then I've gone on several mission trips with kids that are in the system, and there's a ton of things that they don't tell their parents are going on in the system. So I really don't think that is the best answer.
Well,
I really don't think that's the
and
best
I would
answer.
even say our kids have gone on many mission trips. Now, this isn't necessarily true of every parent, but for us, our kids never went on a mission trip without one of us.
Right.
Because I'm not even going to send them with a mission team and other adults. They're young enough. This was when they were pre-18 years old.
Yeah.
16, 17, and 18-year-olds. I'm
We went
going
with
with
them.
them.
Yeah.
I'm not sending them without me.
Well, they're in our charge, right? So I think the whole point is, if your family is your school, and if you take seriously the charge that you need to be discipling your children, you need to take seriously the charge that you need to disciple your children, and you need to know what's going on, and you need to be engaged in what's going on.
Right. So I would say then that the choice to send your kids to private school, private Christian school, or homeschool, those can require conviction.
Right.
People can do that out of a conviction that this is going to be best for our kids. We're doing it intentionally.
Right.
And it comes not only with the conviction, but the accompanying sacrifice,
Fair
whether
enough.
that's money or the time and investment in
Or both.
both. Yeah.
It can be both.
So
Right.
as we think about the conviction to homeschool, you already mentioned a few of the things that are associated with that conviction. What are some of the others? Because we are proponents, we're advocates for homeschooling. Mm-hmm. We truly believe it is the ideal. It's not second best, and so we're going for something good enough. We actually believe it is the best option, period. And part of that is because we do love our kids more than anybody is ever going to love them. We have their well-being, the interest, we care about their well-being more than anybody else. Right. And we want to have a long-term relationship with them. And so as we spend time with them and learn their interests, what makes them tick, their learning styles, we are best equipped, best informed to actually train them up in a way that's going to allow them to answer the question, what is God calling you to do with your life?
Right. And again, I want to just make sure we say this, and I just want to make sure we keep saying this. It's not to say that we did it perfect. There's not to say things that we would have gone back and done differently. We talk about how we hope that our kids will do it better than we did. And that's very exciting to me, with our grandkids, to see our kids doing it better than we did. That's very encouraging to me. But what we did do well was we saw them as individuals. And we endeavored to seek God and to do what was in their best interest during that. And I think that's the opportunity that you have in home education. To me, marriage is this massive work of sanctification. I have to die to me, you have to die to you for us to come together. It does not work if I remain the selfish, arrogant, prideful individual I was, or still wrestle not to be. But marriage is part of the work of God to sanctify us into the image of his son. Parenting is that too.
Yes.
You have these little people, and they're looking at you and they're trusting you. And it's like, oh my goodness, why do they repeat and why do they mimic all of my worst habits, right? They pick up the worst things, all the things you want them to do that you're trying to drill into them. They miss those things. And the other little things that you do that you haven't gotten rid of yet, they pick those up. Take it one step further and have them with you all day long. And that is sanctification.
Yes.
They see you at your best and at your worst. We've been through some tough things with our kids. We went through unemployment, had a lot of other miscellaneous and sundry real life issues, churches. We've gone to different churches. We had a church split. We've had some tough things, and we've been right there with our kids through it. That's real life.
Yes, it is.
That is real life. And so for your kids to see you at your worst, and for you to have to work through that and have to trust and to lean into God. One of my favorite things was during unemployment when we didn't have money to pay the mortgage, and our kids saw their dad on his knees seeking God. That is beautiful. And I can only imagine how God's going to weave that into the lives of our sons and our daughters, because they're in the real world and they're going to face real world circumstances. And I want them to remember their dad being on his knees because we were together, right. Because our school was our family was our school. And we dared for them to see rotating the laundry, going to the grocery store, taking a meal to somebody, not knowing how to pay the mortgage, visiting the sick. We dared to do all those things together because we thought it mattered.
Well, and as you were mentioning, the conviction that's required for marriage, the conviction and sanctification that comes with parenting, homeschooling does do that same thing.
It does.
Because it blends everything together. Your marriage, your parenting, your family life, your church life, your work life potentially, everything gets meshed together in a way that is beautiful, but it's sanctifying. And so here's what I would say in terms of the conviction on homeschooling. I'm not going to quit on our marriage just because it's hard and convicting.
Right.
I'm not going to quit on my parenting just because it's hard and I feel like I'm looking in a mirror too often and it's, condemning at times.
Right.
When I convict or when I choose to homeschool out of conviction and I commit to it because it's good for me, it's good for you, and it's good for our kids and family,
right.
Then it becomes part of your family culture, part of your DNA, part of what we do as a family. And your kids actually find security in that. They know we're a homeschool family. That's what we do. That's what we're doing next year because there's no other option. It's the best. It's the ideal.
That's what we do.
We've committed to it. We're convicted that it's the best thing for us.
Right, yeah. And I do think, when I think back on the 26 years that we did it, obviously there were things we didn't do well or at all. There's things that I would do differently. You just said it's beautiful. I look back and I think it's a big hot mess of beauty. It's not a classical piece of art, but it's beauty from ashes. It's a lot of brokenness, a lot of mistakes, and yet God wove together something really beautiful, really, truly valuable. That's
a great way to say it. And on that really beautiful note, we're going to bring this conversation to an end. So thank you for listening. We hope you'll join us again next time. You can always send us an email to podcast@apologia.com. This is Let's Talk Homeschool, brought to you by Apologia Educational Ministries, and we are your hosts, Davis and Rachel Carmen. Have a great day, and until next time, we are walking by faith and enjoying the homeschooling adventure of a lifetime.